Let's make some bread. Time for bread. Woo! Good morning, everybody. Guess what? We're gonna make bread.
No way.
All right. Now I have to tell you, one of these things I love about baking and cooking is, do you know what? It's science. Great time to do science and math for you. So actually, up front is our little science experiment. In your bag of supplies that you picked up last Friday, there's a little Ziploc bag that says yeast. We're going to use that to make the bread, but I actually put about a teaspoon of yeast, a teaspoon of sugar, and some warm water into that bottle and stuck a balloon on top of it so that you can see when you make bread, you know how it's got all those little holes in it? Where did they come from? They came from the yeast that's putting off CO2. So it's blowing this balloon up. All right, keep watching it while we're going. Let's start with the bread. You're gonna supply most of everything except the yeast. So we're gonna start with 1 1/3 cups of warm water, 1/2 tablespoon of yeast, and I sprinkle it over the top, and we want to let it, they call it, let it bloom. All right, let it soak in there.
Isn't that a Beatles song?
Let it bloom, let it bloom, let it bloom. We're going to stick in 1/2 tablespoon of salt, 2 tablespoons of oil, and we're going to add in 3 1/2 cups of flour. Now sometimes I put 1/2 cup of whole wheat flour in along with that, but today it's just all white flour. I'm going to be right back while I get my spoon.
Jesus said, "Give us this day our daily bread." Now, as a person who's gluten intolerant, you just go, ugh, couldn't we have a rice cake or a cauliflower loaf or something? No, bread's important. It sustains us. So if you're gluten-free or gluten intolerant or you have one of those gluten issues, if you can't make it at home, ask your friends to make it for you and you can watch them do it too. Just being part of the process could be really cool. And now back to Andy.
And there are recipes out there for you guys to do with gluten. All right, so I've started mixing the flour. This is where we get our hands dirty. I love this part of it, I have to say. In we go. So we're going to just kind of bring everything together in the bowl. And then I'm going to get the last 1/2 cup of flour that we need for our bread. And I'm going to spread it on the counter.
Did you clean the counter?
I did.
Okay, just making sure.
A couple of times.
Okay.
Just to be sure. We're going to put all of this out there and we're going to start to knead our bread.
Hey Andy, do you have to knead your dough?
Yes, you do need to, but when we knead the bread, we're K-N-E-A-D. That's how you spell knead. And what you do is you watch how I push down on it with, this is called the heel of your palm. Push down on it, and then we turn it, and we fold it, and we do it again. And believe it or not, that whole 1/2 cup of flour that I put on the counter is going to get worked into this. And this is where we're building up the gluten in our bread. Right? We're stretching it. We have to work the bread. In there, that yeast is going to start working. It'll start making those little air pockets in the bread. It takes probably about 5 to 10 minutes of kneading. So people who do this a lot are very strong. But I really enjoy this. There's lots of fun things you can do with this. Can you just make a loaf of bread?
I would.
Sure.
Ooh, can you make pretzels?
You could make pretzels. There's a slightly different recipe for that, but it's the same process.
Can you make cinnamon rolls?
Yes. And usually with that dough, they put a little bit of sugar in it so it's sweeter. How about pizza?
Pizza. There's bread and then there's pizza. Well, pizza's flatbread. Oh, you can make flatbread!
We could make flatbread. So, lots of things that you can do with this. When you're kneading the bread, you'll keep working it until you've worked all of that flour in, and you don't need to keep watching me knead this bread. but it is a lot of fun. But once you get done kneading it, and you'll know when it's done because you'll have all this flour incorporated in. When you push on it, it'll expand back out on it, and it'll all come together and look nice. You've kneaded your bread to it's the point where we're ready for it. Get it into a nice ball, and you put it into a bowl that's greased. Now this is the dough that I put in about an hour ago.
Oh, wow.
And I set it on a warm spot. I actually put it in the oven. I turned the oven to 200, then I turned it off and let a lot of the warm air out until it just felt kind of nice and cozy warm in there. And I stuck it in there. So it has more than doubled its space. That's its first proof. This is the fun part.
Don't do that to your siblings.
Don't do that to your siblings. All right, letting the air out. You knead it back up one more time. This is called proofing the bread. All right, we're gonna let it rise, but what I would do at this point is I would put it into whatever container I was going to bake it in. Do you have to have a loaf pan to do it?
No.
If I wanted to, I could take my bread just like this shape, bake it pretty so it doesn't have all these little finger holes in it, and just set it onto a regular baking sheet, and you would have a round loaf. Or form it into a loaf and do it. You're gonna let it rise again for probably about an hour. It's gonna go into the oven at 350 for 45 to 55 minutes until it's nice and brown.
Oh, that house is gonna smell good.
It smells yummy. And you guys are ready to go. And so we made dough. We saw what the yeast does to the dough. You're all gonna be ready for a special dinner.
Hey, Andy, what did this yeast say to the salt?
I don't know. What did the yeast say to the salt?
He said, I don't know. Where's the laugh track?
Ba-dum-bum.
All right, so now what happens?
We're gonna bake the dough.
We're gonna bake the dough. All right, let's bake the dough.
Okay.
While we sing.
Here it comes.
The volume up is really rather necessary.
I love bread.
Work off those bread calories.